Thomas Southard. I was born in New Jersey, Plainfield, New Jersey,
What year?
in November 11, 1937.
Okay. Mom?
Oh, my turn. All right, I'm Gloria, and I was born on September 28th, 1939. I was born, let's say, 5 or 6 months after my sister was killed. So I really don't know if I was born in the hospital or at home, number one. I don't know who took care of me because my mother was distraught with the death of my sister. And I think she was hospitalized.
Your mother?
My mother. So I don't know exactly where I was born. I don't think I was born in a hospital. I think I was born at the house, in 39. Give me a break. Yeah. There.
Was that a normal thing to actually have birth?
Yeah, right. I mean, well, they had midwives, I'm sure, but I don't know. My birth is kind of a blur because a lot was happening during that time. And I was born in Springfield, Massachusetts.
Growing up, did you guys have any nicknames when you were little?
Yeah,
Yeah. What was it?
Tom. Although my mother called me Tommy. And a lot of my friends called me Tommy. I have one that still calls me Tommy.
Who's that?
Alan Leibowitz. And I was born in a hospital.
Yeah.
We know that. Right?
Muhlenberg Hospital, as a matter of fact. It was the only hospital in town.
Mom, did you have any nicknames or anything?
No, I never did. I was kind of sorry because my brother had a nickname, Red.
Mm-hmm.
No one ever nicknamed me. And Gloria, how do you nickname Gloria?
Right.
It's such a
Glow.
innocuous name, but it's Gloria in the church, and it means glorious. But I fall a lot short of that. So, but no nicknames, no. And no, I never had a nickname. No.
Were you named after anybody?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't even know who named me. Because I don't think my mother was in any shape or form. But I do think my godmother named me. And I think for the couple of months I lived as an infant, from the birth, with my godmother. I don't really know. And my brother, he doesn't remember yesterday, let alone 80 years ago. So, it's kind of it's kind of lost because it was a bad time. Yeah. And I do know my godmother is Julia Santinello. And I think she was the one who named me and took care of me. But other than that, I don't know.
Were you named after anybody?
My father's brother is named Walter.
That's okay.
And my mother's brother was named Walter. So I'm thinking that's where the middle name came from. But nobody that I know of was named Thomas.
Except Doubting Thomas.
But I wasn't doubting at the time.
What about you talked about the turbulent time when you were born and stuff like that, but was that part of your earliest memories, stuff like that?
I have no recollection of my early childhood, none at all. And that was when we lived, and my mother and father lived on Taylor Street. That's where my sister was killed. So from Taylor Street, we moved to Acushnet Avenue. And that's why I say my godmother, because that's where they lived, on Acushnet Avenue. And that's where they said, well, that's where you used to toddle. So that's what I'm piecing together. But,
Which was like a few blocks away, not, miles.
yeah. And my mother would not go back to the other house. So consequently, I think I stayed with Julia. I don't really know. But then my mother and father, moved to Columbus Avenue in one place. And then we moved to 860 Columbus Avenue in the block, or what do you call those? Apartment buildings. And that's where my earliest recollection comes from. And it's almost like first grade. Because I was the oldest of my little group of friends, except for Butch. And Butch and I were the same age. And this is Antoinette brother. And he and I were contemporaries. So we started together. But that's where my memories start, from first grade.
What about you, Dad? What's your earliest memory?
I remember going to school.
Like elementary?
Yeah, we had 3 elementary schools in town, and I went to one of them up until 3rd grade. Then I went to Florida for a year because I was having trouble with mathematics and reading, and I went to a private school in Florida, which was a room full of 6 students, all different classes. So I was only 3rd grader. And I used to ride my bike to the school, which was 4 miles away, and ride my bike back. Sometimes I wouldn't get back when I was supposed to, because they had a petting zoo on the way home. So I would stop there and get yelled at when I got home. I lived with my aunt and uncle in DeLand, Florida, which is
Why'd you end up there?
because I was having trouble in school reading and arithmetic, and they said, send him down here. We have a teacher that will help him, and it did.
You struggled with dyslexia, right?
Well, that wasn't diagnosed until probably later in elementary school. But it wasn't. They didn't know. They just thought I was a slow learner, I guess.
What you mentioned, like sitting at the zoo and things like that. What other fun things did you do as a kid?
Well, down there we went to the beach a lot. We were kind of close to Daytona. I remember I was a Cub Scout when I went down there. I was a Cub Scout before I went down. And I took the Cub Scout uniform that we used to wear up north down there with me. And they were knicker pants. Everybody down in Florida was wearing shorts. I was in one parade, I remember that. And I'm sure everybody was going, look at that kid, you know. But I was very proud. I had my little Cub Scout outfit on, and you know. And I remember taking money from my from my aunt, because down at the store, they owned a store where you could buy paper and pencils and stuff like that. Well, there was a park there, and in that park was a popcorn vendor. And they poured, it was a little gas fire, and they poured the butter over it, and it was a quarter, and you got this huge thing. So I would hustle a quarter from my aunt every time I could and go down there and eat popcorn.
Did you ask for it, or did you take it?
Probably I asked for it half of the time. And then the rest of the time I just happened to find a quarter here and there. You know?
How about your ride to the pier on your bicycle?
Oh, that was in elementary. We lived at 441 West 6th Street in Plainfield. It was a 6-room apartment, first floor, and my mother used to go to different houses. She was doing draperies and also alterations, and she owned a business. She owned a storefront for a while, but I don't remember the storefront. That was before my memory. But she would put me in the car, and we would go. And she was saying, when she came back, the cigarette that was in the ashtray was put out, smoked and put out. So I think they were thinking I was smoking the cigarette and putting it out. But I don't remember any of that. I do remember my father saying after dinner he would offer my mother a cigarette, and they would have a cigarette after dinner. So they asked me, would you like a cigarette after dinner? I said, sure. So my father took me in the living room, sat me down, said, I'm going to show you how to smoke. And it was before 5th grade, because we hadn't moved yet. And he says, okay, take in a deep, okay, now swallow it. Okay, now take in a deep and swallow it. This is after we ate dinner. And I promptly threw up. My mother was mad at my father, but I didn't smoke after that. I don't remember smoking before that, but I didn't smoke after that.
Because they suspected you of smoking. That's
Yeah, yeah. But I did the chairs that you have that have the
Rushing.
wicker in the middle. We had those kind of chairs in the dining room. And the dining room there's a hallway, and then an alcove for the dining room, and then the living room was on that side. And there was a little wall there a chair was, and then the cabinet for the dishes and stuff was there. So there was a chair here, chair on the other side of that. And I'm not really sure how, because I don't remember how it caught on fire. But the wicker chair caught on fire. And I got it out before it did the wall, apparently. But that was a long discussion after they found it, because I put a pillow on the chair, and I know they didn't find it that day. But there was a discussion after that.
What about, you mentioned Butch and things like that in your old neighborhood and stuff like that. What type of things did you do as a kid for fun?
Oh, God. This is city. Inner city. You know, like you see on TV now. That's where I was raised. And our playground was ashes that they took from the boilers that they heated the apartments with. They'd shovel in coal, and then the ashes had to be taken out, and they'd spread it in the yard. So that when you fell, you were almost mortally injured, because those things were sharp and scar here. But I mean, but you know what? It was a happy childhood, because I don't remember any real bad things. We had a park, Forest Park, that we used to take the kids to. And it was past the jail. And that's where they had grass. We used to go and spread our little towel out and sit in the grass, because you couldn't sit in the grass at our place.
At the jail.
Yeah, in front of the jail. They had a lawn. It was nice, but it was a jail. But, you know, it was like I don't think they were long-term jail, do you think?
No.
No, it was kind of drunken, disorderly, or whatever. But it was a nice jail. But you had to walk past that. I mean, I remember as a child walking with Antoinette, Butch Calvanese, Jerry, and her sister, Antoinette's sister Marie. And you know, the only one that's left of that group is Butch. All the others are dead now. Jesus. Anyway, and Rita. Rita was my companion. Marie was Antoinette's little sister. So we would walk to the park, and it was a good mile, at least, you know, Forest Park. And we'd go in the park, and I mean, we would go early in the morning, not early in the morning, but mid-morning. We wouldn't come home until supper time. But he was talking about this quarter. I remember with a dime, there was a bakery on the way to a bakery manufacturer, whatever, on the way to the park. And you get a bag of donuts for 10 cents. And that was our breakfast and our lunch. And if there was any left over, you ate it on the way home. But, I mean, it was cheap, you know. But it was, and we played in that park all day long. I mean, it was just, I don't know if my mother ever worried about us. You know, I mean, we don't let our kids out the front door. This is like a mile away, no supervision.
Traffic.
Yeah, traffic. We had to cross the highway. Didn't bother us, you know, I mean, you just... And again, it wasn't like 55 miles an hour. You're talking early 40s, 45, 46, 47. Because I was born in 39, so I was 6, 7. And when it was like 5th grade, 6th grade, we were still doing this. I mean, Antoinette is probably my oldest, first best friend, you know. And my mother didn't want me to hang around with her too much because her mother was like the tramp of the area, you know. But
The block.
yeah, the block, yeah. But, you know, Antoinette had nothing to do with that, you know, but, you know, you don't want the influence to rub off, I guess. But I do remember going, and that's where I had a cigarette. Antoinette would steal from her mother or father, and I would steal from my father. Pall Mall, unfiltered. You didn't take the whole pack. I mean, they would miss that. So you take one or two. And that's where I tried my cigarette. Didn't enjoy that at all. But the one thing I always remember, Antoinette always made me laugh. We were climbing a tree, a pine tree. I mean, these trees that you have out here are stunted. This was a pine tree. I mean, huge. So everybody got boosted up. Antoinette went first. Marie was second. I was next, and then Rita. There was just the four of us, I can remember that. And we climbed this tree. I mean, God forbid if I ever fell. I mean, it was good night, Charlie. But anyway, we get up there, and we get Antoinette's at the top, the very top, and the tree is doing this. And she says, hey, go on down. I got to go to the bathroom. So Rita climbs down, she jumps down. I climb down, and Marie freezes. I can remember Antoinette is kicking at her sister. Get on down, get on down. Thank God nothing happened, you know, but dear, when I think about it now. Then when we had the boys, there was a creek or a water that ran through the park, and there was a tree that had a hanging limb. And they said, let's swing out on the limb, right? And just hang on real tight so you don't fall in. Well, the inevitable. Butch fell in. I mean, I think about that now. You wouldn't let your kids do that kind of stuff. You know?
Did when you were growing up, did you guys have a specific toy that you grew up with that you liked? That was,
Toy?
like your
No.
favorite toy?
We had toys.
I know, just didn't.
No, we played with rocks.
What about you?
I remember playing out in the backyard at 6th Street, and part of the backyard was dirt, and we had all these little trails, and we had trucks and cars and stuff, the small stuff. And the kid across the street, his name was Jimmy Snedeker, and he would come over and we would play in the backyard. My sister, I don't remember. My sister was older, and I don't remember her doing anything with us as far as out in the backyard and stuff like this here. But I remember a little bit about 6th Street. After I got back from Florida, we stayed there, and then in 5th grade, we moved to a bigger, a one-family house. And my bedroom was on the 3rd floor in a little alcove kind of place.
But you mentioned your sister. Did you get along with her growing up?
I thought so. Yeah, I don't remember fighting. We even in school, even in high school and everything, she was ahead of me in school, and we got along fine. As a matter of fact, she went in the Air Force, and she was the one that talked me into going to the service. But on 6th Street, I really don't remember her at all. My father drove a bus from New Jersey to New York. He made 3 trips a day. And on the sometimes I would go in and back out from New York, but most of the time I would meet him down at the corner because his route took him right by, close to our house. I'd get on the bus and go to the end, where he got off work, and get in the car and come home with him. So, and that was like 45 minutes, I guess, that we rode the bus. But that was kind of cool. And really, anytime you wanted to go into New York, you could.
Just you and your sister?
The perk was you didn't have to pay to ride the bus.
Who would go with you to New York? You and your sister, or just you and your friends? Or?
No, we went as a family.
Mm.
So we went to Radio City Music Hall a couple times. We did walking around during Christmas.
What about your family, Mom? Like your brothers and sisters? Did you get along with them? I mean, you mentioned Rita.
Yeah, but my sister Mary was kind of older than me. And my brother was too, because he's, I'm 39, he's 33. So he was 6 years older than me. I mean, if I was 6, he was 12. He was getting into that funky age. But Rita was 5 years younger than me. So Rita and I were kind of like stuck together, just because I was always saddled. I felt like I was saddled with her. But she was my constant companion, really.
But everybody got along?
Everybody got along fine. I do remember one fight with my brother, and he pushed me through the glass.
You remember what it was about?
I don't remember what it was about, but I was mouthing back, and Joe didn't take that, So, and he didn't hit me. He pushed me, and my elbow went through the glass. And my
Of what?
Of the door, the little floor panel went through the glass. Number one, it was expensive. I mean, and we had nothing. But my brother got it that time. Yeah.
What about getting along with your parents? I mean, something like that probably caused tension, but what about generally?
But I didn't have a relationship with my parents. I don't think we did things together like that, you know? I mean, it wasn't like your kid, you sit down and chit chat. When the parents were talking, you were out of the room. You weren't part of that conversation. You were, what is it? The children are to be seen and not heard and stuff like, because that was the culture, you know? And my mother and father's friends spoke Italian exclusively in our house. Now, when the neighbors came down, or, you know, you interacted with the neighbors, there was American English spoken. But in our household, most of their conversations were in English. I mean, in Italian. We kids spoke English. But my mother's English never developed. Never. You know, I mean, she spoke with an extreme accent.
You mentioned doing family outings in the bus with your family, stuff like that. Do you guys did a lot? Did you guys get along as parents?
I remember 2 vacations, that's all. When we were on 6th Street, I remember 1 vacation when we were on Webster Place, but it was when we would go to visit a family member, an aunt or an uncle or something like that. We would never go camping or any of that stuff. I remember on 6th Street, a lot of washing clothes with the old washing machine that had the crank wringer up on top.
But generally with your father and mother, though, did you get along with them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my father was never home. My father was driving the bus every day.
Well,
And I don't know I don't remember what went on the weekends. You know, even when I was in school, I was hanging out with friends in elementary school, and because the elementary school was just up the street, and it was a neighborhood school back then. So you know, we would go up to the school. Same situation as far as part of the yard was all ash from the burners, and we would play up there. And
so when your father drove the bus and stuff, and your mother, she was a little bit more well-to-do though, right? So I mean, tell me about that relationship between him, like driving the bus and things, with Southard being.
Well, my mother supposedly, because I never met her mother and father, but supposedly they came for money, and my father didn't. And after they got married, they were kind of set aside. My mother did get some plants from where she used to live, but they never really talked about her side of the family. I did know my father's side of the family. I knew my grandfather and also my aunt. They lived on Front Street, and we would go there because right across the street from her house was a movie theater, and we would go there on Saturday with a quarter. You could get a drink, bag of popcorn, and pay to get in the movies for a quarter. And in the movie, it was a lot of cartoons, a part of a film, you know, the old westerns that they would stop and you had to come back next week to see what happened. Yeah, well, that's what that was. But they had stage shows too, clowns and stuff like this here.
What's like a very memorable childhood memory, as far as what's your most favorite childhood memory? I mean, you're mentioning going to the movies and things like that. I mean,
Yeah,
was there something that really sticks out?
I really don't. Comes to mind nothing other than when I went to Florida. I had a great time because I was pretty much left alone down there as far as my aunt. I mean, I had to be home, but when I would go to school, I'd ride my bike, and I might be an hour and a half late coming back after school was over because I was doing different stuff. So,
Mom,
But-
what did your parents do for a living?
My father worked for the city. When I remember, before that he worked for WPA. It was the big deal with Roosevelt. He worked for that 3 days a week, and then he got on to the city, which was a godsend because it meant steady pay. That's what it was, steady pay. And my mother was always in the kitchen. I mean, she did work 3 months before that, but I mean after that. But my father came in, we had dinner. Whenever my father sat down, that's when we ate, and we always ate at the table. There was none of this picking up a sandwich and walking away. No. Everybody sat down. As with Tom's family, it was one of those things that I don't know if it was a cultural thing, but when you sat down, that's when you had dinner. And it was usually when my father came home, washed his hands. He didn't shower or anything. He washed his hands and face and sat down. And everybody would come to the table. But when you speak about a favorite memory, I remember playing in the yard, and my father would whistle. I can't whistle, but that was a signal, and every kid in the neighborhood knew his father's or mother's call. It was like that bell, bang, bang, bang. But that's when you came in. Your father was home, time for supper. And we'd go out after supper in the summer. But it was
So that
kind of,
sound was.
yeah, and when he whistled, it was just one whistle. I don't even know how to do it. But that meant, oh, Gloria, your dad's calling you. So Rita would follow me back. But you know what? I do remember our apartment was only four rooms. The kitchen was a designated kitchen. There was a living room and 2 bedrooms and a bath. It was just a square. That's all there was. And 4 floors up, 16 apartments, and they were absolutely identical. The apartment, when my brother and sister and I, and then Rita came along, Rita slept in the crib in my mother's room, whereas my brother slept in the bed by himself, and my sister Mary and I slept in the bigger bed. That was it. I mean, there wasn't, and it was, I don't know, until Mary got married, I never slept alone, because then after that, I slept with Rita. It was different, but it was wonderful too, it's.
we both had, my sister and I both had separate rooms.
Separate rooms.
But I do remember her talking about eating and stuff. My mother, we would have to put the spoons and the knives and the butter plate and the glass and the plate all in certain spots, and you had a napkin with a napkin holder, and it was always formal. And my mother and father liked to entertain after we moved to Webster Place. I remember, they probably entertained when we were younger, but
Did you have extended family come over for entertainment?
my uncle from here, from Virginia Beach, came up a few times, but basically he came up to get sober.
What
And,
about your grandparents? Do you have any memories of your grandparents?
well, my father's father and mother, we would go over there a lot. We called him Pop. And we would go over there, and they would come over to our house once in a while. We would more go over to their house, mainly because they lived on Front Street, and that was where everything happened, on Front Street.
But Pop lived with you for several
after
years.
after his wife died, he came to live with us. He was a fireman, and he was a fireman that took care of the horses, and they had, I guess, five horses there, and that he took care of, and and he was a fireman too. I mean, it didn't just take care of horses, but
Wow.
it was growing up with that. It was kind of neat.
What about his personality? What was he like? Do you
Oh,
remember?
he was a nice little guy.
Yeah.
Very flirtatious. He liked young people, young women. Yeah.
What about your grandmother? Do you remember what she was like?
She was domineering. He couldn't do anything at all at home, so that was right. So
And she was Irish.
yeah,
And was not looked upon very kindly because of
Grandfather
her
was
Irish
English?
descent.
no, they were both Irish.
What
Yeah, but my mother's family was English.
What about your mother and father? Your grandparents? I'm sorry, Mom.
I've never seen any grandparents.
Because they were in Italy.
They were in Italy. My mother went there in '76 to see her folks, and she saw her folks then. And then she went there later, and they were both dead. But I did meet my uncles when they were
Yeah.
aged, because we went there. We went there in '99 and then 2000, whatever. But when we went in the later ones, one of my uncles had passed away. But we didn't have any visiting uncles and aunts. But we did have lots of cousins, I didn't know them as cousins. They were like my mother's cousins, the Bonavitas and the Grimaldis and stuff like that. But as formal
in the neighborhood.
as formal as their eating habits were, ours were as informal as could be. I mean, we sat down with dinner, but our meal was in one pot,
Did around the table, did you get along with your parents? Or
and there was a lot of conversation, and it was mostly, what did you do today? Did you get a job, or did you do this? Did you do that? And my father would say what he did, because he was a trash collector to begin with. And then he got on as a mechanic, He was very handsome.
Did he give you advice? Did you talk to you as a father?
No, God knows, none of that crap.
Okay, so
The thing is, you knew you had to be good. You had to. How'd you do in school today? Oh, the teacher told me blah, blah, blah. Tomorrow, you apologize and you go to the teacher and say you're sorry. There was none of this, timeout stuff. You knew you had to behave. And the advice was, be good. That was it.
And the teacher was never wrong.
Yeah, right. That was the thing.
you mentioned the memory of your father's whistle. Is there any other memory that you have from your childhood?
Yeah,
Your favorite, though.
oh no, this was the memory that was the saddest memory. And that was the day I came home from school, and my mother was crying. But the last time I came home from school, my mother was crying. Was, I think, her mother passed away. So I came in and I thought, oh, someone else had died. And my godmother said, no, Gloria, there's bad news. Your father had a accident.
How old were you?
I was 14. And the other accidents my father had, my mother used to call my father, terrible, bird brain. It was gabarujil, bird of a head. So it meant bird brain. And he was like furios. He did things quick. Well, one Christmas, he's earning extra money with the plow. He stepped out of the truck and broke his ankle. So that kind of wiped out that Christmas. Or he went to work and he did something and he injured himself. You know, he was kind of like quick, very quick. He was intelligent though, because he could figure out anything, you know. But anyway, so I came home from school and my mother's crying and my godmother says, and this is another godmother. This is my confirmation godmother, Dahlia, who passed away. Dahlia Peretta. So she says, no, your father's had a bad accident. It's okay. Big deal. You know, he gets another cast. Who cares? She said, no, he's in the hospital. That was a big deal. So we couldn't even go to the hospital at that time because they're trying to evaluate him or something. So when we did go, he was in a striker bed. And a striker bed is, the head is here and you turn it like this, you know, and that had to be turned
like this.
Yeah, it was
So that they could put him on his back or on his stomach so he wouldn't get pressure.
pressure points. And I thought to myself, oh my God, how's he going to get out of that? But he never, it was never. But the memory that I do have is my father told me, this was a while after he had gotten hurt. He said when they put him in the hospital and they examined him and they knew he had a broken back and he would not walk again. It was a spinal cord injury, and the doctor said when he came in, you know, we'll do the best we can with this guy because he's not going to make it out of this hospital in a year. And they thought my father was unconscious, you know, but he wasn't. And my father never lost consciousness from the time he was hurt until after until before surgery, because they did do surgery. They kind of repaired what they could because there were bone chips or whatever. He said, he thought to himself, you son of a bitch, I'm going to outlive you. He did. He did. But it wasn't outlived walking. It was, paralyzed. But he said that's the only reason why he lived as long as he could. Had to wait for that doctor to die. But he died, shortly after that or something. He was, they didn't have the things that they have now for paraplegics. I mean, he could have lived a good life had he lived now. But back then, it was very, very cumbersome.
Dad, you mentioned the lesson your father taught you with the smoking and stuff like that. Were there any other lessons that he might have passed down or your mother passed down to you?
There was one that we had a neighborhood dispute with another kid. So they said the only way to take care of that is with boxing gloves. So they gave us boxing gloves and we went out in the backyard And I remember fighting in the backyard with boxing gloves. That was,
Did you win?
you know, if I don't remember that, I probably didn't win. You know? But I don't remember whether I won or not. But I remember him getting the gloves. This is the way you're doing it. This is, you're going to take care of this. I said, okay.
Were there two fathers involved, or was it just you?
No, just me and the neighborhood kid. As a matter of fact, it was Jimmy Snedeker. So, but down the street, he and I had gone down. There was a huge house on the corner, and these people that had moved in about a year prior, and they had in the cellar they had this big cabinet with gauze on the doors, not glass, it was gauze. And the kid that lived there showed us, they had come apparently from a farm, and he showed us they had meat in there that they had cured, and that was the meat that they would eat. And they apparently brought it from the farm. So, but in the backyard was a pond, brick all the way around, and we didn't know how deep it was, but there was a lot of fish and a lot of lily pads and all this other stuff. So one winter, Jimmy and I went down there, and we're going to walk, see who could walk across the ice faster. Well, the ice wasn't ready for anybody to walk on it. So consequently, both of us, because it was 1, 2, 3, go, both of us came back soaking wet. I remember my mother saying, "What happened?" I said, "Well, I was on the side of the thing, and I stepped on a stone and I fell in." But I didn't tell her that we were trying to go across. But the kid that lived there at the house, he said, "Don't tell my parents that you were in there, because you might have killed some of the fish." Damn fish.
What about you, Mom? Are there any lessons that your parents passed down to you, or was it that? Did you have that
Oh yeah,
lesson?
my mother. Always put the dollar aside and don't let your husband know about it.
Is that still true today?
True today. Because she says, you're the keeper of the vault, you know? And when we were first married, we didn't even have that dollar to put away, you know? I mean, working on
Well,
2 cents.
well, tell her how much she had at the end there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When my mother, the money she gave us.
Yeah.
Okay, my father died in 70. She kept the house a year. This is on Warrington Avenue. She kept the house a year, and then she sold it. She sold it for $20,000. Now, during that time, from the time my father was hurt until he died in 70, which was 15 years prior, he was hurt in 55, and he died in 70. 15 years, my mother had to live on whatever this compensation that the city gave her. But the house was paid for. From the time we walked in the house, everything was paid for, because the city built the house for my father. There was no insurance, none of that crap. But anyway, she lived like, I think my father's retirement was $10.39. It was some real little, but you collected Social Security because he was disabled and whatever. I don't know how my mother did it. I mean, it amazes me.
Well, besides the money that she gave you after that and stuff like that, did they give you any other things like heirlooms or anything like that passed down?
TJ, all the heirlooms were in Italy. She came here with a trunk full of linens. And, I mean, those things get used and thrown out. There was no heirlooms. We lived in the 40s. Everything was veneer. And we wanted new things. We didn't want old stuff because we lived with old stuff, you know. I mean, you just did. But let me tell you, when my mother sold the house, she sold it for $20,000. So my brother said, we're going to take this money, $5,000 for Mary, $5,000 for Joe, $5,000 for me, and $5,000 for Rita, and put it in annuities, not annuities, well, whatever it was, like IRA, I don't know. But anyway, it was for account. But you couldn't touch it. I couldn't take that money. So it was $5,000. Now, my mother died in 90. He says because from 70 to 90, if she needed that money, she could tap into it and use it. She never touched it. So in those 20 years, when she finally died, when she died in 1990, my brother said, this is yours. It was $30,000. So from $5,000 to $30,000 in 20 years. I mean, because she wouldn't touch it though, you know. But she didn't want anything. She didn't need anything. And I think at this point, except for Tom's extravagance, we don't need anything. We don't need new furniture. We eat well. Our bills are... So we're pretty well set.
What about, I know that we have Nana's ring, obviously, but what other things did she give you? Anything?
We had some silver stuff from her parents, service and stuff like this here, but not a whole lot of stuff. We still own a burial site in New York City.
I think you gave that up though.
No, we haven't done anything with it, so I'm sure that it's probably gone to somebody, but that was for the leverage, and then, which was my mother's maiden name, and then because my mother and father married, then it was on us. But there was a bunch of plots, and I remember my mother, they said something to her about it has to be cleaned up because it had a wrought iron fence around it, and she had to pay to have that taken off so that they could cut the grass and the trees and stuff. So, but that's about all. Yeah, no, there was some bonds that she had. I remember that, but this was after she died that we found out about that stuff. And the insurance back then was, the insurance guy would come to your house once a week, and you would give him $2 or $1 for your insurance.
Waters.
And those insurance policies she still had, and they were she didn't pay any more on them, but they were pretty good too.
So besides like physical things, are there anything that like stories or anything like that that your parents passed down to you from their lives or anything that you remember?
Well, my mother always, she had a sister and a brother, and the sister would always get the smaller car. They had a limousine, and they had some other kind of smaller car, and her sister would always get the smaller car, so she had to drive the limousine if she went out. That was about all she, you know. She said they had a good life, but apparently in the crash, they lost their. He had a plumbing company.
Electrical company.
Electrical company.
Electrical supply.
Yeah, and they lost all that.
What was the name of it? Do you remember? Was it a store?
I have no idea.
Hackinger?
In New York, wasn't it?
So-
Was
so-
it in New York?
No, it was in New Jersey.
New
Well,
Jersey.
did your parents ever talk about Italy or any stories from Italy?
Oh, yeah. My mother talked about, well, I asked her one time, like you will eventually ask me, how did you meet my father? She said, I never met him. The first time, well, you got to remember now, Nunno came over in 1930. My mother came over in 31, and you saw the manifest there. Okay. But before that, Hitler and Mussolini were circling the grounds. And my grandfather, my mother said, was very, very, he was an engineer. And he said, you know, there's some terrible things coming. And he says, we got to get my mother out of there because they heard stories of rapes and plundering and whatnot. So, and Italy was on the track. So my grandfather, Giuseppe is my grandfather, he asked around. He says, does anybody know anybody who's an American citizen? No. But someone said, oh, you know, Antonio Lucerino from Naples? He was born in America. So what's he doing here? Well, when he was born in Boston on Hanover Street, and that street's still there, he said his parents came over before that, and they didn't find the streets lined with gold. My father's father, didn't find a job or whatever. So when my father was 17 months old, they went back to Italy. So he has no recollection of America, but he knew he had an American citizenship. So when my grandfather was scouting around, he says, okay, you will marry my daughter and you will take her to America. And he probably paid him. So the first time my mother saw my father was when she was introduced to him, and they said, this is your future husband. The second time they met, my grandmother and my mother and my father kind of took a little stroll to acquaint themselves, and the third time was on her honeymoon after the marriage. So she married a complete stranger. She had no recollection. The only thing she did know was that she was going to America, and she did not want to do that.
Was there love there?
Love?
No, not in the beginning. Eventually, did it happen?
It was a different kind of love. It wasn't that kind of amorous, oh, you're my everything kind of love. It was a dependability. And my mother was a very, very strong woman, and she had no use for men, period.
Mm-hmm.
So she was the dominant person in our family. And it was because she was not frivolous. She held the budget. You know, she held everybody accountable. But it was a good thing because we probably would have been in the streets with my father. It's just the way it was, you know.
So, Dad, you mentioned the family vacations and stuff like that. I mean, you went on a couple or something like that. Did you go on anything special? Was there any special vacations that you remember? What about the boat, like on your father's boat? Did you ever get on that?
No, I don't think we ever got on that boat.
Oh, I got a ride in that boat in Lake Winnipesaukee.
Oh, that was the small boat. That wasn't the big one.
Oh, the big boat, no.
Yeah.
No,
That was big boat?
no, you kids were messy. You can't get on the boat.
You guys.
No,
Oh,
no.
we didn't get
They
on the
big
boat.
boat.
Ooh.
He had a 15-foot Trojan with a 30 horsepower motor on it, and
How long was it?
Hmm?
15 horsepower, but how big, long was it?
15-foot
15 foot. Okay.
Trojan.
Sorry.
with a 30 horsepower motor on it, and they used to go to. This was after I was in the service. They used to go to Lake George for vacation. And I went 2 years that they were there. The second time I went,
That was Lake Winnipesaukee.
oh yeah, no, yeah, right.
Yeah.
They went to Lake George. And
Later
there was
on
many,
with
and
the-
there was too many rocks in Lake Winnipesaukee because he kept breaking the prop on the motor. So that's when they went to Lake George. But that was after I had left. But we went to Lake Winnipesaukee, and it was that was their vacation. I was in the service at the time, so I do remember though when I was a kid, we were making. My father was into that HO trains, and we would put those together, and we in the dining room on Webster Place we would work on that stuff. And one time we decided to do an airplane. And they told us that you have to break the motor in. So we started the motor in the dining room, not thinking at all about anything. And after we shut it off, it ran good and everything. After it shut it off, we noticed the wall was all splattered with oil and gas. So my father said, okay, we're going to rearrange. So he took the cabinet that I think
The
you guys,
hutch.
the hutch, do you still have that? Yeah? We moved that over to that wall to cover the oil and the grease. But we did a lot of trains, and he was very intricate and very precise when we did stuff like that. And I do remember those things, but not much of anything really.
What about any vacations?
Yeah, we did. We had vacations. We went 1 week out of the year. We went to Savin, Savin Rock in Connecticut. But it was like a community vacation. You'd get like a little, like you guys did, like the Santinellos and whatever and everything. Everybody would rent the same week and we'd get to go there. And every year, my brother Joe and I would get burned to crisp and go home sick as dogs. But it was fun, I do remember one time we got, the tubes. We didn't have floats. We had tubes, car tubes. And Rita and I, you know how you sit on the tube back to back? We're floating. And we're in, I think that's part of the Connecticut River, I'm not sure. But anyway, we're floating. And all of a sudden, we look up and there's a yacht. I mean, as kids, you're just floating. Well, what had taken us out was the tide. So I can't remember if it was Tony Grimaldi or what had to come out and swim and pull us in. We're going to the ocean. But as kids, what do you know? And I can remember my brother Joe and I laying there with blisters. Oh, this was fun.
Besides that, how was it like growing up as a redhead kid?
I was the only redhead in the whole city of Springfield, I think. And my brother Joe used to tell me, he said it was really a handicap being a redhead because whenever they got into mischief, the cop would say, the redheaded kid was there. So my poor brother, he got blamed for everything, but he probably deserved it as much as anything too. But I always remember being the only redhead. I know I couldn't have been the only redhead, but I remember through high school, how come I was the only redhead in an Italian neighborhood? Now, when you get into high school, you get the lighter hair and the blonde cheerleader. You know, you get those kind of differentials. But there was black kids, and we had blacks in our elementary school, but I was the only redhead. And maybe that was in my head more than anything. Because even in our family, there was just Joe and I. But when we went to the Bonavitas, lots of redheads. That's why I liked them.
Did, let's see, typical day growing up, you know, like, pick an age.
Okay.
Typical day from like, go ahead.
I got mad at my mother one time I was on Webster Place, so I was in 5th grade. Got on my bike. I'm running away from home. And I pedaled and pedaled and pedaled and pedaled. I don't know where I was going or what, you know. But then I noticed a ship. And I mean, there's no water around my neighborhood, my home. There's a ship coming in. I said, and to this day, I really don't know where I was. I think I know I'd gone south, but I don't know where I was. But anyhow, so I said, well, I better stop here. So I went to the movies. I had 75 cents that I'd run away with. So I went to the movies, and I remember I have no idea what the movie was, but when I went in, I'm sitting there, and I'm worried about, you know, it's going to get dark. I got to get back home. So I left before the movie even ended. Rode the bike back. My mother said, "Where you been all day?" I said, "Oh, I just went for a ride." But I was running away for some reason or other. But to this day, I don't know where we were. But I remember an ocean liner coming in. I said, "That's too far."
What about mom? You said when you sat down dinner, it was just normal talk and stuff like that. What was a typical day in your household growing up?
We played. You know, children don't play. But we went out first thing in the morning. This is after school or in the summer. We played outdoors all the time.
Yeah, we were.
When we came home for dinner, and our dinner, as formal as his was, ours was about as informal as you could get. Because there were no niceties, you know. I mean, we didn't have napkins. We used the dishcloth, and you passed it around, you know. You put the bread in the middle of the table, and my mother would scoop it out, or you would scoop it out. It was very informal, but you had to be there. I do remember my sister getting her knuckles smashed one time by my father because she took the bread, and she was being snotty or haughty, and she took the bread and she put it on the table, and it kind of just turned over. And then she sat at the table, and my father took the end of the knife, not the sharp end, and he went, "Oh!" right across her knuckles. And he says, "That's because you disrespected the food." You know, I mean, you had to learn lessons. And one of the lessons was you didn't throw bread around because it was a staple. And it wasn't like a statement of any religious or public or whatever. It was just the thought that she was disrespectful.
You mentioned school. Did you have a favorite subject in school growing up?
school. I hated school.
Yeah.
Again, it was like the only one. I bet you in high school, I bet you there were 2 people that knew I went through high school. I kind of faded into the background, didn't talk. You know, I did have a favorite teacher. Mr. Cutler is my 5th grade social teacher. And I can't remember if it was him or her, because I had Mr. Cutler for something and Mrs. Cutler for another. But they were a favorite, and I'm not even sure which one it was at this time, 5th grade. But I liked school, but I was older than everybody else, you know, because my birthday's in September, so I made the cutoff. So everybody else was a year behind me. But you know what we used to do, a typical day? Rita, Marie, Antoinette, Butch, and kid Jimmy, my cousin on the 4th floor, Jimmy. We'd have shows. Get a blanket, tie a rope. Our building had a porch. Each apartment had a porch. And the neighbor was here, but you kind of had your own little porch. And we'd string a rope, put a blanket over, and we'd have shows. You know, magicians and tap dancing that we never took lessons in. But that's how we entertained. We had a good. I remember my childhood being very happy.
Dad, what about you as far as school? Did you have a favorite teacher in the prom or anything like that? Did you have a favorite subject or?
I probably was the skater in school. I don't remember ever doing homework.
Sounds familiar.
I played football and I swam, and I was good at those things. I learned how to swim at the YMCA, and then we had a pool at the school in high school. But I was not a student, and my transcripts will show that. But I had a good time in school. We, had a lot of friends, and a couple of enemies in elementary school. But by the time we graduated elementary school, if you stood up to them, then all of a sudden they were your friends. So.
And he has a friend to this day, Alan Leibowitz.
Yeah. We lost touch after he went in the Army and I went in the Air Force, and we lost touch after that. But then found him in Georgia,
Yeah, right.
and then we've been talking ever since and visit when we can.
Mom, how old were you when you got your first job, and what was it?
I was 16, and I was a cashier at Growers Outlet. And it was like a Lowe's, like you have here, but
Grocery store.
grocery store. And it was okay. It was okay, I wasn't very good with it, but I'll tell you what, and I've told Dad this, it was in the neighborhood. And again, people most likely thought I was Irish because red hair, freckles. And the Italian ladies, would always try to slip something past you. And I could remember one lady saying, "Hey, she's Irish. She's stupid. We'll get her." And I understood them. And I'd keep pushing things back so they couldn't get it off. But that was an advantage. I understood everything that my mother and father were saying. But it was very difficult for me to give it back. And to this day, I wish they had made us answer in Italian because you would have had the fluency as a child. Now, my sister Mary went to school only speaking Italian. And she never came out with an accent at all. You know what I mean? But those were your formative years. And
Dad, what about you? What was your first job? How old were you?
I was 16 also. Went to work in a men's store. I was a salesman. I was the guy over in the socks and the underwear section. So, and I didn't remember. I didn't think that was anywhere. But when I got my Social Security information, every job that I had was down there. So, but I worked there in school in the summer, and there was one guy that owned the place, and back then the people that owned the store was in the store, you know, and when any of the stores, it wasn't basically, it was a grocery store, but if you wanted meat, you had to go to the meat store. And when we went to the movies, if you wanted candy, you had to go to the candy store before you went into the movies. It wasn't in the movie theater. You had to go next door, and always it was next door, but you had to go to the candy store to get that. So.
What about growing up to you? Like, did you have any dreams of being something? I mean, as far as what did you want to be when you grew up? I guess when you were little, did you have any idea?
I don't think I was thinking about that at all. I was my fixing a car. I wanted to drive, so we bought a 1941 Buick, and we rebuilt the engine in the backyard. Alan and I, and a friend of my mother's, who was a mechanic. We took that thing, took the engine apart, rebuilt it, put it back together again, and amazingly, it drove. So, but that was the first car, and me and Alan wanted to go drive to high school, because we were riding bikes to high school. So.
What about you, Mom? What did you want to be when you grew up?
oh, you know what I want to be? A ballerina. Because you know the Ed Sullivan
She didn't
show?
quite make it.
Yeah. The Ed Sullivan show. You know, the Nutcracker and all those pretty tutus. That's what I want. Dancing on your toes. I never took the first. My mother wasn't going to spend money on dance lessons, but she did spend money for my brother to have music lessons.
Accordion lessons, yeah.
Yeah. We never got it. And then my ambition was to be a secretary. Woo-wee! I mean, you never thought beyond that. I mean,
Yeah.
there just was, okay, you could go to be a nurse. Well, you had to go to school to be a nurse. Who's going to put out the money?
Mhm.
The only one who was offered an upper education was my brother. And he says, I'm out of here. I'm not going to any. I mean, he barely made it through high school. Isn't that a shame, though? You know, when you think about women now, it just wasn't there. Although my sister Rita did go to like a community college for nursing, but she never finished it. She moved to Boston. Whoa. That was a big whooey in our house.
Tell us about. Go ahead.
Break.
All right. Well, I've got one more question. That's all. Can you wait one more
I
question?
gotta go to the bathroom.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
This one's mine.
Yeah. I can take it off if you want.
I'm not gonna be that long.
Well, I don't want any audio.
Oh,
When-
would there,
Pause or you let it go?
would there be audio?